Okay, this is a really exciting day. That at homecoming we enjoyed the birth announcement of UCR's new Ag and Food Institute, and this is more like the baby shower now. So we get to party and eat and hear some great talks. There are a lot of units that I need to thank for this event. Global Studies and its director, Susan Osman. We wouldn't be having this event if she hadn't conceived of bringing together these sorts of ideas. I want to thank our speakers, Gustavo Arellano and David Karp. I want to thank the UC Global Food Initiative that's funding part of this. Thank the deans from CNAS for conceiving of CAFÉ and giving me the gift, once thought to be a white elephant, now definitely a gem, of pulling this initiative together. Wendy Simmons from the Alumni Center, Rachel Alvarez from the Dean's Office who created the menu. There's been a lot of work on this event and we've all been really excited to bring everybody together. So at this point I'd like to introduce Susan from Global Studies, and she will give you a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you for coming today. We're really excited to be a part of the CAFÉ initiative. And I especially have to thank the undergraduate education and Steve Brent for the capstone grant that actually led to Global Studies becoming an integral part of CAFÉ. Of course, we'd always be interested in food and at the level of the faculty, but the capstone grant enabled us to finance part of this event today and to bring our students into CAFÉ. So today with us we have a group of seniors in Global Studies. They all have to complete a capstone project, and this year, just by chance, without knowing that CAFÉ was going to exist, I had decided that they would work on the topic of global food. So CAFÉ and global food come together. They will be interviewing a number of you and other people working on food on campus, and through the research of each individual faculty member and also staff person working with food on campus, they will be looking at how your research reaches out to the world. They will be developing these interviews, doing research on the topics you're interested in, and then preparing a book, which the students always do at the end of their senior seminar. Not only will they prepare the book, they will also contribute these interviews to the CAFÉ website and any other publications in which CAFÉ would like to run some of these interviews. So some of you know that you'll be contacted soon for interviews. In any case, be watching for them. It's a great way to have the students do a hands-on exercise that also teaches them all kinds of new things about what's going on at UCR. So thanks for being here. And now, Tracy Khan, whom we all know and love, will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Susan. So as she said, my name is Tracy Khan. I'm a member of CAFÉ too, and I'm a citrus researcher and the curator of the UCR Citrus Variety Collection. It's actually my great pleasure today to introduce David Karp. One of the wonderful things about working at a university is you get to meet people you might not otherwise get to meet. And one such person is David Karp today. David Karp is actually a writer and photographer. He specializes in fruit, and particular interest was citrus, germplasm, and farmers markets. He knows a tremendous amount about farmers markets. His articles have appeared in all sorts of publications, including the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Gourmet, Smithsonian, and several scientific publications such as Hort Science and the Journal of American Pomological Society. He is the majority owner also of Xanadu Orchards, which farms 11 acres of specialty stone fruits in Morgan Hills, California. And I'm lucky to know David because I have worked with David for a number of years now, and he's an associate in Experiment Station. And he's been working with Tony Siebert on a decade-long project to actually photograph everything, the over 1,000 different things in the Citrus Variety Collection. And you can actually go see his photographs if you go to our website, which is citrusvariety.ucr.edu. And with that, it's my pleasure. Let's welcome David Karp.
Thanks so much, Tracy. I've been a writer specializing in fruit for over 25 years. I've written literally hundreds of articles, probably thousands of articles about fruit, but there's just a very few that really stand out for me. And the article I finally wrote about tejocote for the Los Angeles Times 6 years ago really stands out because it was, like many articles, actually, it was so long being incubated. I know there may be 100 different fruits on my radar list, and I've written about most of them, but tejocote wasn't even on it until the year 2000, when I'm not even sure how I found out about it, but there was a US Department of Agriculture, APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, SWAT team called CLAMP, based in Los Angeles and in southern Florida, that was aimed at clamping down on smuggled fruit. Now, people who aren't familiar with the world of agriculture and quarantines and pests often smile at the notion of the fruit police, which was going to be the name of the article that I was assigned by Gourmet Magazine. I sold them on this. I thought that this is really interesting. But once I got to meet these people, I found out that what they were doing was dead serious. I asked them at one point, downtown in the Southgate Ag Station, what's an example of a fruit that's most often smuggled into California? And they said, tejocote. And I said, what the heck is that? And they say, well, it's like a little Mexican crab apple. That's really the most I encountered of it then, although I looked it up and was able to find out a little bit about it. The article never went anywhere because when I wrote it kind of with what I thought a good balance of seriousness and fun, but my editors wanted me to tart it up, and I wasn't willing to do that. So, as sometimes happens, it laid it aside for like another 6 or 7 years, when I just looked up the other day when I was putting this together. It was Ramiro Lobo, the small farms advisor for San Diego County, who happened to whisper to me when I was talking pitahaya to him, the dragon fruit. He said, you know, Jaime Serrato's growing tejocote. And my jaw dropped. After a quarter century in this business, I sort of know when there's something really special. I knew who Jaime Serrato was. I knew about tejocote, and the fact that they were together was almost magical. So, let me tell you the story. Tejocote is a fruit that's prized by Mexicans, that was smuggled before and isn't smuggled now. And that would be the end of it. They're not profit and pleasure in the telling, as my great hero Vladimir Nabokov would say. So, once the most smuggled fruit. When I interviewed the CLAMP folks some 16 years ago, they said that some 9,000 pounds had been seized the previous year at the Los Angeles downtown farmers market. Why is that? Why would anybody bother to smuggle something like that? Well, the price in Mexico is low. It's grown on thousands of acres there. It's sold for just like 75, it's less than $1 a pound. In the United States, it's much sought after by Mexican Americans for reasons that we'll go into shortly. And fetched a price at that time was closer to $8 or $10 a pound. So I was actually able to later working with Tracy on a project called Unforbidden Fruits, partly inspired by my experience with tejocote. I was actually able to get formal statistics, and it turned out that tejocote was the most smuggled fruit from the most country that supplied the greatest amount of fruit that was seized coming into the United States. It's actually not at the border so much, but more once it's SITSI, Smuggling Interdiction and Trade Compliance, which was the successor to CLAMP, provided these statistics. And when I later dealt with them, trying to get anything out of them is almost like getting a state secret, really. It's like you're trying to find out who our CIA secret operatives are in Yemen. It was very difficult to get information, but this was actually published in the Economics of Agriculture and Wildlife Smuggling and confirmed by the author. When that smuggled fruit, by the way, came in from Mexico, it was rife with pests, because a lot of that tejocote is actually basically gathered from the wild, particularly apple maggot is one of the pests of quarantine concern. So let's find out a little bit more about tejocote. I didn't know anything about it. I bet most of you don't now, and that's entirely understandable, since unlike apple, pear, and even quince, and some of you might know Hawthorn, it's almost unknown to those of us who are not Mexican Americans. So these are all pomme fruits. They're in the Rosaceae, that includes the rose family. They actually were conflated with the meloidea, with the amygdaloidea, The stone and palm fruits is the subfamily. The genus is Crataegus, the hawthorn, which is a huge genus. Some people would say as many as 280 species. The hawthorn is relatively well known. I mean, it's the maypop of the southeastern United States. It's widely grown for medicinal, ornamental purposes and for fruit, particularly in East Asia. Of these 280 species, they're native to the northern temperate zones like East Asia, Europe, and Eastern North America. So these species, the taxonomy is a little bit vexed. It was often called Crataegus pubescens, but that's inadmissible, taxonomists say. The name is Crataegus mexicana. There are between 13 and 15, depending on who you consult, species of Crataegus in Mexico, and tejocote is basically the Mexican name for all of them. The name is derived from the Nahuatl word acid fruit stone, and in Guatemala, where it's also native, it's called manzanilla, which basically means little apple. It's a large bush or small tree up to about 7 meters, 20 feet or so. The wild form is usually thorny, but the cultivated form, at least here in the United States and commercial plantings in Mexico, is larger fruited and largely thornless. The leaves are elliptic, medium to small. The underside of the leaves is densely hairy. The fruits are pomes, again, related to apples, pears, and quinces. They're red to orange-yellow and often speckled with little black dots. The fruits contain 3 to 5 hard brown seeds, and we're going to be handing out samples, by the way, for everybody to taste whenever you think is a good time. You can start doing it right now. They're native to the central highlands of Mexico, from Mexico City to Chiapas, and hardy in zones 9 to 11. They can be grown in Southern California, the American Gulf Coast, and the Mediterranean. When they've been introduced into the Northwest and the Northeast of the United States and Northern Europe, they don't survive the winters. The season of harvest is typically in California, October to December. It ranges a little more widely depending on elevation in Mexico. How delicious are these?
Are they legal?
Yes, this is all totally legal. It was grown in California at a farm you're about to see. Notice that there are 2 forms. If there's enough fruit, you're welcome to take 1 red one, which is somewhat more delicious, and 1 of the yellow-orange ones. I've got to warn you, before you bite into it, the fruit is mealy and not very tasty raw, but it does have a sweet, tart apple-like flavor when cooked. And also, it's been in storage for a couple weeks because the season, these were last marketed at Christmas time, only because I knew somebody that I was able to actually have these samples here at this time for you. They've got sort of a bubble gum-like flavor, which I actually find nice. I like them, leave them to perfume the kitchen. So why are they important in Mexican culture? They're not important to every Mexican, I gotta tell you. You talk to somebody from northern Mexico, they have no idea what this is. But for people from the Mexican highlands and those who are familiar with their culture, it's used for several purposes. First, for the Day of the Dead, the Dia de Muertos, the tejocote fruit, as well as candy and various things like necklaces made from it and rosaries, are an essential part of the altar. November 1st and 2nd, that starts the tejocote season. The most important use, however, is ponche, which is used from the Day of Guadalupe, that's like December 12th. This is the Mexicans have a much longer Christmas season. I hope I'm getting all this right, because I've got a real Mexican listening who's about to regale you with his tales. So it plays a similar role to that of eggnog in Western culture, but perhaps even more significant. The 3 basic ingredients are tejocote, guava, and sugarcane, which is right here. But others can be added, including tamarind, hibiscus flowers, and dark brown sugar are also typical. Also, about half the time I'm told, I mean, I didn't do a systematic survey, but those who are in the know told me about half the time some kind of hooch is added to, some kind of liquor, rum or tequila, particularly if it's adults who are going to be drinking it. The tejocote is rich in pectin, and it contributes an appealing, unctuous texture to the ponche. And so I've talked to the Mexican Americans from the highlands, and they say it's just not Christmas if you don't have tejocote, whence the intense demand. So it's also used peeled and preserved in heavy syrups. In the Mexican highlands and haciendas, back in the day, I was told by Rachel Loudon, a preeminent food expert and historian who actually lives in Mexico or has lived there until recently. Back in the day, there was not many fruits in the Mexican highlands, like 9,000 feet, and tejocote was savored throughout the summer and throughout the winter, preserved in heavy syrup with a bit of cinnamon. It was also used for making jams, jellies, and various different forms of preserves. It was candied. It was even woven into necklaces. A APHIS agent actually told me, a Hispanic told me that she hung it around her neck and ate the fruit. And it's also used in Christmas piñatas. They're stuffed with this and candy and various gifts, and then, you know, piñatas, you swat them open. And it's used, curiously enough, as a rootstock for other pome fruits, apples, pears, and quince. So it's cultivated in Mexico. As I said, it's not everywhere. Mostly in the highlands, basically from the Mexico City area south to Chiapas and into Guatemala. The biggest state of production by far is Puebla. That's like 95% of the real commercial production, although it's grown to a considerable extent in backyards and gathered from the wild throughout Mexico. In 2008, which are the latest statistics I was able to find, nobody keeps real statistics on tejocotes, so it's only occasionally that they're amassed. In 2008, about 65% of Mexico's production came from commercial orchards on about 1,700 acres, predominantly in the state of Puebla. And 30% came from backyards and 5% from wild trees. The price is low, just 20 to 25 pesos per kilogram, so less than $1 a pound. There's considerable variability in tejocote, both in the wild and those forms that have been selected for cultivation, because of their curious reproductive biology, namely they're apomictic. They basically come true from seed, which is great if you're propagating by seed and want something to be the same as the variety you selected, and not great if you're a breeder and want sexual variation in the progeny by crossing one variety with another. So they're basically selected from the wild, at least so far. And the most important variety of tejocote is the Picoso de Huitzilopochtli, I hope I'm saying that right, from Puebla. Two selections of which are predominant in Mexico now, Calpan Gold and Chapeado. Notice that, if you can read this, there's a huge variety in, well, you can see, in fruit size. And as it turns out, the smaller ones tend to be a heck of a lot higher in bricks and in flavor. So this little one that's 3.5 is 15 bricks. The standard one is close to 20 grams in size, and it's 8.5, so half the bricks, many times the size. So this is the variety that's grown in the United States, and you'll see who's growing it and where he got it from in just a second. These are actually the same two varieties that are being passed out right now. Did anybody, yeah, you did get some of the small red ones. These are much more flavorful, as you'll see. These were from a tree in Durango. Somebody brought back the seeds. They're grown by Rancho Mexico Lindo in Valley Center, and these are grown by Jaime Serrato, of which you'll hear more. These are some of the other varieties that are cultivated in Mexico. There's just 2 or 3 scientists that have really researched tejocote intensively and gathered a germplasm collection in Puebla State, where most of the tejocote is grown. So that's Mexico. How did tejocote get to California and the United States? I actually found out when I was just putting this together a couple of days ago that one source, which I had not realized, had never seen before, said that it was brought to the United States, to California, as early as 1868. But the person who really brought it to any kind of attention was a curious character named Francesco Franceschini, also known here in the United States as Emanuel Fenzi, he was born in Italy, got a doctorate at the University of Pisa, came here to Santa Barbara in 1892, and brought in all sorts of fruits, imported fruits from around the world, and took an interest in propagating avocados and cherimoyas and Capuan cherries and tejocote. Did they ever really go anywhere with that in commercial propagation and cultivation? I don't think so. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Luther Burbank, perhaps the greatest fruit breeder the world has ever known, the breeder of the Santa Rosa plum, the Burbank potato, and a host of virtually single-handedly created the Asian plum industry, the plums that are cultivated now today. Anyway, he worked up in Sebastopol area and in Sonoma County, and he also had a vision of taking the tejocote and making it into a fruit that's large enough, he said, I bet we can make this something really delicious that people will want to eat. There actually is one tree up there at the Gold Ridge Station that I visited, and the fruits are actually pretty good. I think there's some potential there for somebody to do more with that. But even though, if you read up through various different pomological works throughout the 20th century, they're mentioned, but nobody in California went anywhere with them. I'm not sure why, because there were Mexicans here. You think there would have been some from the highlands who would have wanted to buy this fruit, but that wasn't the case. So remember I told you, 2006, Ramiro Lobo, farm advisor from San Diego County, tells me about Jaime Serrato. Now he's a legend, partly because, part of his legend is that he was the grove manager for Sam Perricone, who is the most legendary citrus grower of the 20th century. Just died 2 years ago or so. I was privileged to meet him at the, Bern Evans introduced me to him at the downtown LA produce market. Jaime Serrato, boy, did he make good. He came penniless with his family when he was 10 years old from Michoacan. He's 58 years old. He became an incredibly successful grove manager, both for Sam Perricone and for others, farming avocados, citrus, and various other specialty fruits that were intended to be marketed to Latin Americans who weren't otherwise able to find them. Like at the time, very few guavas were grown or imported here. Sweet limes, and tejocote. I asked him, where'd you get the budwood for this? Because this is a highly desirable variety. He said that he got it from an employee's aunt's tree in Chula Vista, some 15 or 16 years ago or so. He actually didn't know the name of it, but I was able to identify it by sending photos to Mexican scientists as the Picosa de Huachazingo. He's in Palma Valley, which, know where that is? It's in North San Diego County. Here's Riverside right here. Here's San Diego. Here's Palma Valley. And here's Temecula. Here's Escondido. So it's inland, North San Diego, a great citrus and avocado growing region. And he's at elevation about 700 meters, about 1,800 feet or so. He harvested his first small crop in 2005. At peak in 2009, he had like 35 to 40 acres, but he's since cut back by 10 acres or so. Main problems that he's told me about were sunburn. In Mexico, I guess the climate, because they're at high elevation, the climate is more temperate, i.e. it doesn't get very cold, but it also doesn't get as hot as it does. And Valley Center can get to 100 or so. And these are light-fleshed, light-skinned fruits. They burn. Also, standard problem with pome fruit of fire blight and codling moth, although not too severe. There's other growers, too, who found out about tejocote. The legend spread, partly due to my article, and even though we tried to play it down, I think he was making a lot of money back some time ago. People started planting it, and what they found before too long is that there's a limited market for this. Why is that? This is like a textbook economics case of a, what do you call it? There's a limited demand. I'll think of it in just a second. What's the economics term when, anyway. Why is that? Because the only real demand for this is for making ponche and for a few other things. And people are not, because tejocote is just one ingredient in ponche. It's not like if that price goes down from $4 to $1, you're going to make 10 times as much ponche as you would, like if you could get cherries for $2 rather than $8, you'd probably buy a lot more, right? That's not the case with tejocote because it's just one ingredient in a larger recipe. So here's some pretty good photos, if I say so myself, of the tejocote harvest at Serrato Farms in 2009. They've got a nice website, serratofarms.com, if you want to check out some more. The trees are big and beautiful, and they bear super copiously. The season, again, is October to December, and they pick each tree 3 times by color and size. Here's their packing house, a little shed on the property. They're packed in 20-pound cartons in a trailer. They hold up to 2 months in storage. And when I met with Jaime at the time, he was investigating what kind of things he needed to do in terms of controlled atmosphere. One of the biggest problems in California is that the variety, at least that he's growing, matures a little bit too early. In some cases, he's got to store it for 2 months. And they're fine for a month, but 2 months, they're looking a little peaked at the end of that time. They're sold through distributors to Latin chain stores. At the time, it was Superior Grocers and Gonzales Northgate markets. And I know, the market is inelastic. That's what I learned in Economics 101 some 40 years ago. So he recently pulled out, he says he's marketing the fruit at $4 a pound wholesale, so it's probably like 6 or 8 retail. And he says, I can drop the price, I'll sell a little more, but it doesn't make sense. There's about 15 acres of other plantings in California, so there's maybe 40 acres in the entire state. And this is really the part that was most interesting and that helped launch the Unforbidden Fruit Project. Now that it's available here legally, grown domestically, it's no longer smuggled to any great extent from Mexico, which is a boon for American farmers and for everybody that doesn't have to pay their tax dollars to suppressing pests that are not being brought into the United States and having to be sprayed for, or farmers losing their production. So that helped. Tracy and I actually, and 4 others, launched a project to see with citrus, if we grow it here, then they won't smuggle it. But that's another story. So here's the last twist. I just spoke to, well, over a couple years I've been staying in touch with Jaime. I visited him just a couple of weeks ago to obtain the samples that you have on your tables right now, and he brought me up to date. He was afraid some 5 years ago that the Mexicans had requested from the United States government the ability to export these fruits from Mexico to the United States. And of course, that wasn't good for Jaime. I spoke to David Lamb, who's the project coordinator for APHIS. Just yesterday, I caught up with him, and he said that, well, a pest risk assessment, if any of you are in agriculture, you might be familiar with that. Before something can be brought into the United States, they have to do the government has to do a pest risk assessment. That was completed some years ago. But the final rule that would be issued by APHIS is very close, said David Lamb. It's still not there. He said probably it'll come out sometime in 2015. So at that point, fruit will be potentially coming in from Mexico. The PRA estimated 200 tons might be imported. But that's actually about the same as Jaime Serrato himself produces. So I don't know where that's going to leave him or Mexicans or the market. Certainly, competition from Mexico, where it of course originated, will discourage domestic production. So there he is just 2 weeks ago or so. Maybe some of you can see, he looks a little different. He's got a beard compared to, he just had a mustache, now he's got a whole beard. I almost didn't recognize him when he came out of his truck. So I guess that's it. There's so many different aspects of tejocote, but we're out of time. I'd be happy to take questions from anybody that's interested in asking me.
Well, thank you, David. I think that, now I know what inelastic markets are. So I'm also going to go home and try to figure out what to do with tejocote so that we can use it for something else. But in the meantime, I bet you there are a bunch of questions. And so why don't we have a few questions for our speaker, and then we'll have lunch.
All right.
Okay.
Tejocote is a really intimidating topic.
Okay. So, Phil, why don't you ask the question? I'll repeat it and then hand the microphone to David.
I wondered if are they marketed across the U.S. or mostly here in California?
Okay, question was, are they marketed in the U.S. or just in California?
I've heard from friends in the city, in New York, that they are there in his boxes. So yes, they're across the United States. I would say the majority of his fruit does stay in California, though. I've never asked him that kind of question, like what percentage stays here, but the majority is here in California.
Okay. Question. Nikki?
Has there been any type of study to see if they're being grown in people's home gardens?
Question about home gardens.
Here in California? Yeah, they actually are available from nurseries, so I'm sure that people are growing them to a certain extent. People who sell at farmers markets grow them in small quantities. We could ask some Mexican Americans here if any of their friends are growing them in their backyards. Yes?
My aunt has a tree, and she says until probably like 9.
All right.
Has 9 trees, you said? Oh, since you were 9. Oh, so it's a big tree. Okay.
All right.
Okay. There's a question there.
Yeah. Has anyone done any sort of studies on it to see if they could find any specific health benefits?
Yes, has anybody done any studies to see if they can find any health benefits is the question. Indeed, there's a whole host of studies that have been done by the Mexicans. They're high in antioxidants, they're high in various compounds. Personally, I'm a little skeptical of that kind of thing because I find that almost every fruit commodity commission that I deal with is touting their fruit. It's like, I always wanted to see a cartoon where one fruit's boxing another in the ring for title of super fruit of the year or something like that. But yes, as you would imagine for something small and wild-like of this, it's very high in various different phytochemicals.
Okay, Sharon?
Sort of an odd question, but the recipes you described sound incredible. So have these recipes get used in historic
Can you find, has this made it into the mainstream culinary world? Can you find it in an English language cookbook? That I don't think so. However, at the time that my article appeared in the LA Times in 2009, a number of mixologists, who I normally have very little trust with, took an interest in tejocote, and in fact, one of them, John Sedler of Rivera Restaurant in Los Angeles, we used his recipe for an adapted version of ponche. And I heard at the time it was, that's not the world in which I generally move, going out to fancy cocktail bars late at night, but I was told that it was being used seasonally at that time. I have never seen it in upscale restaurants in Los Angeles or New York, so I don't think it's quite made it so far. It's a little bit too esoteric for that.
Do you have a recipe you could share with us for that ponche?
You can go online. If you Google my name, David Karp with a K, and tejocote and Los Angeles Times, you should be able to see that. If not, there's my email. Just email me and I'll send it to you. I'll send you the link.
Okay, time for one more question? Okay.
Codling moth, how big a problem it is?
How big a problem is codling moth? Well, what Jaime told me, and he would probably know as well as anybody else here in the United States, is that it's no more significant than with other pome fruits. He does have to spray for it, but it's not a nightmare that spoils his crop. That's as much as I know about it. All right.
Okay, so David's going to be here for lunch, and I'd like to thank him again for his talk.
Thank you.
And I believe the lunch is ready.